So we are going to start. Hag Sameach, everyone. Hoshana Rabbah. Thank you for joining. And the idea of that class tonight, hopefully we could do the full 4 hours. We'll see how we survive. We'll try to do it we'll do it in sessions. Take a break every hour. The idea of the class is we're going to examine one theme, which is the laws, or if there is such a thing as laws of tzniut, of modesty, and we're going to examine it through the development of the sources of halakha, meaning that some issues will overlap as we go from one subject to another. So we'll see that one verse is discussed, and we'll see it in Tanakh, and then we'll see it again in Mishnah, and then we'll see it again in Maimonides. But we will just go through the sources chronologically to see, and through them we'll expand and open up the matters in order to understand first the historical development of halakha, and also what is called the seat in life, that is what were the social circumstances. How did society function at the time where the halakha or the concept was mentioned? Because as we will see that later authors tend to think of the previous texts as written within their social context. So that causes misinterpretation, because a later commentator who, for example, who's used to a reality where all women cover their face would read a previous text that refers to something else as referring to that, and so on. So those are the main two things that we want to do. I'm going to share the screen with you to view the sources, and we'll start. I have Hebrew sources and I have English sources, but we're going to look at the Hebrew now, and I'll translate everything here. So, one second, let me share the screen with you. Is our setup? Okay. Share screen. This one. Okay, can all see the text in Hebrew? Yeah? No? 1 second, again. Now we have it. Okay, so if you see the sources, fine. If not, we'll share them later. I'll read them and give you the references, so you can open it online if you have Mechon Mamre or Sefaria, and follow. So, but what I want to do is first go through Tanakh and see what do we have in the Torah in terms of Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, in terms of the laws of tzniut, the laws of modesty. Try to think where do you find in the Torah or in the Tanakh texts that speak about the laws of modesty, that say this is how you have to dress. Maybe the length of your garments, the length of or the material, or saying that if you don't dress modestly, it's a transgression of halakha. Where do we find that? So I gathered some sources that we have in Tanakh, and let's go through them. The first one is in Bereshit, chapter 24, verse 62. This is about the encounter of Yitzhak with Rivka. Rivka comes with the servant, with Abraham's servant from Haran, and she travels towards Be'er al-Hayroi, and Yitzhak comes towards them. Now, Rivka is riding the camels with the servant. It says here in verse 64, Vatisa Rivka et Aineha, Vateret Yitzhak, Vatipol me'al hagamal. Rivka raised her eyes, and she saw Yitzhak, and she fell from the camel. Now, falling from the camel means that she made the camel crouch, because if you ever rode a camel, when it comes down, you feel like you're falling. So she made the camel crouch. ותאמר אל העבד מי האיש הזה הולך בשדה לקראתנו ויאמר העבד הוא אדוני ותיקח הצעי ותתכס. She asks the servant, who is this man who's going towards us in the field? He says, he is my master. She takes the scarf and she covers herself. So that is one of the sources that has been later used by some commentators to argue that that a woman must cover her hair, because they say here, you see that I'm going to switch to the English text. 1 second. See, here is that source of Bereshit 24. It says she took her veil and covered herself. So the fact that she had to cover herself when Yitzhak came over shows that a woman must cover herself. What are the problems? There are certain problems with this argument. Several problems when we compare it to the halachot of tzniut today. First, Rivka is not married. So does it mean that a married woman must cover her hair? Second, she was already riding with her hair uncovered in the company of men. So does that mean that she only has to cover herself for certain men and not for others? And what would we argue? That Abraham's servant was not Jewish, and therefore she didn't have to cover her hair in his presence, because she only has to make sure that she doesn't cause Jewish men to sin? That's a little tight argument, especially when you take into account that according to the same rabbinical interpretation that says that she covered herself for Yitzhak, Abraham's servant was Jewish because he was converted by Abraham. So either she has to cover herself for all Jewish men, or she doesn't. So the conclusion I think we must draw from this pasuk is that it's exactly the opposite. She's not covering herself for modesty. She's covering herself for intrigue, to arouse some kind of curiosity in Yitzhak. It's inappropriate, maybe she felt that she was not ready to see him after the long journey. She needs to refresh. She doesn't want him to have the first impression of her after she rode for days in the desert. So that's why she does it. But she definitely is not doing it because of modesty. So that's the first source that is sometimes used. The sources that we will discuss are here in chronological order of the Tanakh, but they are not necessarily not in order of importance. Some of them are taken with greater seriousness and some less. And by the way, whenever you feel that you need to ask a question, tfaddal, as we say in Yiddish. So the next source is in Bereshit, chapter 38. That speaks about Tamar and Yehuda. Tamar was the daughter-in-law of Yehuda. She married his son Er, and then he died, and then Onan performed the levirate law, and he died as well. And finally, she was waiting for Shelah. She was not given to Shelah as a wife, so she was the only way that she thought she could fulfill the levirate law, the Yibum, is by perceiving a child through Yehuda. So she tried to tempt him. How does she do that? It says here in the Torah, "V'tasar bigdei almenuta me'aleh, v'techas bat sa'if, v'tit'alaf." She took off of herself the widow's garb, and she covered herself in a veil, and she wrapped herself, and she sat in the entrance of Enaim, that was on the road south, for she saw that Shelah was grown, and she had not been given to be his wife. When Yehuda saw her, he took her to be a prostitute or a harlot, for she had covered her face. So that's an sort of problematic statement. She is a harlot because her face is covered. So the Midrash and there's a famous midrash that also is quoted by Rashi, argues that the covering her face was not at that time when she entices Yehuda, but rather earlier. They say when she was in Yehuda's house, when she was married to his son, she never exposed her face, and therefore when he saw her, he didn't recognize her. This is a flawed argument. Doesn't work with the text for two reasons. First, it says clearly that she covered herself in a veil, meaning that she was covered when she came to him as a harlot. Second, the way the verse is structured is not in the past tense. At that moment, he saw her with her face covered, and he thought that she was a harlot. One of the commentators explains that was because those harlots, those kedeshot, it was a different type of prostitution. It was connected to the temple worship. So, and that's why it says bepetach einaim. It's a holy place. She sits there. They worked sometimes in their own village. So out of respect or shame, they would cover themselves. But here again, we see that covering oneself not necessarily means that it is a sign of modesty. Then we have another interesting halacha that seems to suggest that we talk about modesty. In Shemot chapter 20, it says, "V'lo ta'aleh b'ma'alot al mizbehi, asher lo tigaleh ervaticha alav." Do not ascend my altar via steps, that you shouldn't uncover your loins upon it. So you're not supposed to expose your flesh or your private parts to the mizbeach, and therefore there are no steps for the altar, but rather you go up a ramp. When you go to the mizbeach, you go up on a ramp, and that is how you ascend the mizbeach, and we understand that this is because of modesty, right? But there's another verse that sort of contradicts that, and that is in Shemot chapter 28. V'aseh lahem michnasei bad lechasod besar erva mimotnayim v'ad yechaim yihu. This is source 1:4. Make for the Kohanim linen pants or stockings to cover the flesh of their loins, shall extend from hips to thighs. This way, their flesh will not be exposed on the altar. So, if they have those pants, why do you need a ramp? They could still go on steps and nothing will happen. So, right, this is the problem with the pasuk. So, and remember, we're not talking about a woman's modesty. Here it's a man's modesty, and it's only the Kohanim. It doesn't speak about other people who have to dress in that manner. So that could, it's a possibility that idea of not to cover. It doesn't say it's only in I think in later Hebrew that the word erva is associated with the genitals. In the Torah, this is not the word. Usually means intimate relationship, very close relationship. This is erva, or shame. It's either shame or weakness, as the word erva is used when Yosef's brothers come and he accuses them of lirot arvat haaretz batam. You came to see the nakedness of the land. So it's either nakedness or nakedness in general, or weakness, or intimacy, but not a specific part of the body. It's not called erva. Even in rabbinical language, as we'll see later, not always that way.
The Pinhas story. You know the Pinhas story, where Pinhas.
Torah. It's very important always to remember what is written in the Torah. Yeah. But the Pinhas story is related. It's a completely different story. I mean, it is related in a different context, and that is the context of Tamar.
Yeah.
What we see with Tamar is the concept of the Kedisha, the harlot that performs sort of a sacred service for the temple, which is promiscuous, but under the auspice of the temple. So that because of that, the Torah says, do not build steps to go up to the altar, but because that will allow the Kadesh and Kedeshah to do their sort of the service there. This has nothing to do with exposing the flesh. Exposing the flesh was with the pants. That was so two different things. Here we come to this. I just chose one pasuk. This is in Vayikra, chapter 18, verse 19. Lo tikrav legalot arvata. It says that to a woman who is in nida, one should not come close to expose her arva. But it's I took this verse because it's the clearest of all other psukim that speak about arva, where we see clearly that it has nothing to do with the word arva as we use it today, but rather as close, very close intimacy. The actual intercourse. This is what is called arva. So in the language of the Torah so far, we don't see any commandment on how to dress. One more pasuk here that, as we see later on, becomes sort of the central axis or the pillar upon which the whole argument for covering a woman's hair rests, and that is in Bamidbar chapter 5, verse 18, where it speaks about the sotah, or the deviant woman, a woman who was accused by her husband in having an affair or being promiscuous. So she is being brought by the husband to the temple. The Kohen speaks to her, and then he does something that's called ufara et rosh haisha. And here, the translation is uncovers, but it should really be dishevels or undoes the hair. And why is that? Yes, go ahead.
Can I
Yeah.
So my understanding had always been that it actually means to unbind.
Yeah,
because
unbind
women
or undo.
always
Yeah.
had their hair. An adult woman in many
Right.
cultures has her hair tied, like braided or fixed, not necessarily covered. Just
Right. So the question is
Tied
whether the
up.
word para by itself, and that's where we have to go before you go into commentaries. The first and best commentary that we can have on the Tanakh is the Tanakh itself. I mean, if besides outside understanding Near Eastern, ancient Near East language, culture, and all that, but from the Tanakh itself, we'll look at the term, at the verb para, peresh ayin, and we see what it means. It never means, in all of its occurrences in the Tanakh, it never means to uncover. It always means to upset, to dishevel, to destroy. Like after the Bnei Israel did the golden calf, it says ki pera'o Aaron l'shimtza b'kamehem. Aaron sort of disrupted the order of the Israelites, and now they are exposed. So as a result, they might be exposed. Their weakness is exposed, but it doesn't speak. It doesn't refer to uncovering or anything like that. We'll see later on when we get to the Talmud in Masechet Ketubot. That is the famous sugya, the famous discussion of the woman who is sort of a rebel woman who does not want to follow the Jewish law, Dat Yehudit, what exactly that is, and she is Yotzed Bashuk Verosha Parua. And the Mishnah and the Talmud, even for up to a certain point, still stick to the term Parua. They never say uncover, they never say Gilui, but we'll find it in the Midrashim. So this is really one of the core psukim that we have to look at and consider whether it refers to uncovering or undoing. So, as I said before, if we look through the occurrences of the Tum Para in the Torah, that will be the case, that it is to dishevel or disrupt. Also, another tool that we could use is. I'm going to stop sharing for a second to see the full screen. Another tool that we could use, and then always when we look at biblical words, is the biradical root. Is looking at the first two letters of the verb. This is the idea of that verbs or roots in Hebrew are grouped by the first two letters. Was originally floated by the first grammarians. They thought of Saadia and the early grammarians believed that the Hebrew root has two letters, And it was the next generation of grammarians that said, no, it has 3 letters. And they found the similarity with Arabic, with Aramaic, that all of them has, they have 3-letter or 4-letter root, but not 2-letter roots. In modern times, there was a new sort of a revival of that concept by there was a renewed interest in the Hebrew language and in general in ancient Near East, and one scholar, Aaron Marcus, who was a German doctor, became a Hasid later on. In his book Barzilai, he speaks about that concept of the biradical root, and he shows how when you take in the Hebrew language, every 2 letters combined with the 3rd letter, they will have all these verbs that you could form will have a shared meaning, but different nuances. But that works only with biblical Hebrew, because the later term, this is something that, again, I'm saying it in parentheses, but it's important to have in mind, especially when you analyze halakha, and all these halachot rely on the interpretation of one word. We have to remember that leshon mikra lehud, leshon hachamim lehud. The biblical language is one thing, and the rabbinical language is another thing. And a good example for that is the word lekales that we say in the Haggadah. אנחנו חייבים, we must, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לעלה ולקלס. It's all synonyms of the word praise, and one of them is the word lekales. Now, if you look at in the Tanakh, lekales or leitkales is to disgrace, to shame someone. It's what Shimei ben Gera did to David when he was running away from Shalom. How did the word lekales become a good word? So we have someone here who is a Greek speaker, so you know that, right? The word kalos means good. So they took the word kalos from Greek and made it into a Hebrew word, lekales, and that became here is diametrically opposed. 2 words that have apparently the same root, but one is Greek, one is Hebrew. But even when the rabbis or later generations took a Hebrew word or created a new Hebrew word, it doesn't necessarily fall under the rubrics of the biblical language. So that's an important distinction to make. Always make sure when you analyze halakha or analyze the biblical language that the word that you're discussing is the biblical word and not the way it appears in later rabbinical texts. So if you take the biradical root of the word para, which is peiresh, and you combine it with any other letter that appears in the Torah, so it will be pere, wild, parad, to separate, para, to multiply, paraz, to be without walls, parah, to fly away, parash, to ride away. So all these words are something that breaks out. It's not to be uncovered, but rather to be unruly. So from that, we could definitely see that in this case, ufara kohenet rosh haisha refers to the woman's hair being undone or unbound and not uncovered. You have a question? No? Okay. So now we come to the pasuk that is one of the 3 pillars of the modesty. Let's call it the modesty campaign or the modesty theorem. There are 3 pillars. One is from the Torah, one is from the prophets, one is the Ketuvim. So we have Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. The pasuk from the Torah is what we're going to see. V'haya machanecha kadosh, v'lo yireh b'cha achvat davar, v'shav ma'arecha. Your camp should be holy, lest Hashem will see irava of any kind, whether in nakedness or shame, and He will retreat from behind you. God will not support you. And this is the Torah verse. And this is used if you ever travel in Eretz Israel or in the Orthodox neighborhood like Borough Park or Monsey or Kiryat Yoel. You'll see signs saying "V'haya machanecha kadosh," your camp shall be holy. Women, please go to the other side of the road, or go to a separate entrance, etc., etc. So that's from the Varim. Then we'll see later the pasuk from Micha. What does Hashem ask from you? Hatzne alechet im Elohecha, which is translated be modest, or dress with modesty. And also, we'll see what is the meaning of this pasuk. And finally, a pasuk from Tehillim, chapter 45, where it says, Kol kvuda bat melech pnima. The glory of the princess is to be indoors. And that verse has been used in halacha to limit women in numerous situations, because they say, okay, a woman cannot drive a car because kol kvuda, she has to be indoors, she can't go, she can engage in commerce, she can do this, she can speak publicly, etc. So they all rest on this pasuk from Tehillim which we're going to see in context. Devarim. So let's this chapter in Devarim, Kaf Gimel, and it's important to see it in context. The actual pasuk where it says V'ayam Hanecha Kadosh is verse 15, but we'll start a little before that in verse 10. It says this: when the camp goes out, when you go out to a campaign against your enemies, be careful to guard against wickedness. I'm going to read from the Hebrew and then translate. When you go to war, you have to be careful. You have to guard yourself from any bad or evil thing. What is this evil thing? Is it a physical thing or a spiritual thing? It's not clear yet. If one has a nocturnal emission, should go out of the camp, should not go into the camp. And towards the evening he could come back to camp. Why is he kicked out of camp if he has this nocturnal emission? Is a question of purity? We don't know. Could be, but we'll see with the second half of this paragraph. Maybe it's because of the fear that person has a certain disease, an STD, and it could cause other people to be contaminated. So until he's healed, he cannot come back. Well, we don't know that. It's not clear here. But in verse 13, we read this: and you have to have a dedicated place where you go outside the camp to relieve yourself. And with your gear, you shall have a spike or a little shovel. And so when you relieve yourself, you have to dig a hole, relieve yourself, and then cover it. Which seems so trivial, right? And even sort of disrespectful for the Torah to mention. Why would you mention that? But you realize that the word chutz is mentioned in those two verses 3 times. Ve'yat yelecha michutz lamachane, outside the camp. Ve'yatzata shama chutz, go out. Ve'aya b'shivtecha chutz, and when you sit outside. And before that we have the word chutz again, and the word tzeh, and even the way the pasuk refers to one bodily needs, it's tze'atecha is what it would let's say. So there's an idea of distinction, of we draw a line. You're here, the camp is here. You have to be outside. You can't be inside the camp. And on that, the Torah comments, Ki Adonai Elohecha mithalech bekerev machanecha lehatzilecha velatet ovecha lefanecha. God dwells in the camp. God is with you. And therefore, Vayam machanecha kadosh, your camp should be holy. Velo yireh b'cha ervat davar v'sham mahoecha. And if God will see any disgraceful or shameful thing, He will not be with you. It will not support you. So this is the pasuk that people rely on to say that women have to dress modestly. What is the connection? There's no connection. Yes, Daniel.
If you don't have a towel or thing to clean up, can you use the leaves of the tree?
Yeah, that's what people use. That's what we use at the time. But if you look at Shulchan Aruch, they say don't use dry leaves, because if you use something that can be consumed by fire, you'll be susceptible to all kind of witchcraft and wizardry, and spells, etc. So, according to that, we have a big problem. But okay.
But is a forerunner to by doing that is keeping away from cholera.
Right, 100%. So the irony is that this pasuk has been taken out of context, completely out of context. There's no mention here. First of all, there were no women at war. The rabbis went out of their way. If you know the rabbinical literature, out of their way to say that women should not carry weapons, concealed or otherwise. It says, "En darka shel isha biknei zayin." Women do not carry weapons, and the women do not go to war.
Well, except for defensive war.
What? Except for defense, right? No, I'm not saying that women were engaged in war. There's no question that in the time of the rabbis, in the book of Maccabees, you're the expert in the book of Maccabees. Is it mentioned? No, not mentioned. But Yehudit did. Yes, but they do get out of the way again with Yael and Sisra to say that she took the spike of the tent and not a sword because a woman does not use a sword. Yes, this argument was used also when.
But there are a lot of religious girls in the army. And
they are right, but this argument was used to say that the army will not be holy when you have women there. Even there was even one religious Knesset member who said that disasters happen in Israel because there are women who are dressed immodestly in the army. It was a big problem. Someone has his microphone on.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
yes.
So
Elio.
It says, so below your ervat sounds like you should not see nakedness.
Right, it is. It does say that. So it's true that the word erva is mentioned, right? But it's ervat davar. It's a nakedness of something or weak or certain weakness. So this is really the question. Why? What is so important here? And I think there are two elements here. One is, as Don mentioned, is to protect the soldiers from diseases. Now, and this is in I think in essence the beauty of the religious system. That if you will tell people that they should mind their hygiene because it's healthier, they wouldn't care much. I mean, they should be forced to do that. But when they say that it's a divine commandment, and if they don't do it, God will abandon them, they will do it. So this, in other words, is a way for the Torah to trick people into being healthy. Because this is really one of the common causes of death and eventually defeat in military campaigns was cholera or other diseases that spread through that. And modern armies know the first thing you do that's what we did when we were in the field. The first thing they come and they dig the place. Right. That's one thing. The other thing, which is a little deeper than that, is that this is part of the how would we say that, the agenda of the Torah of re-educating us as humans, when we are being sort of like slowly indoctrinated towards greater respect for each other. So the biggest problem, not the biggest problem, one of the serious problems of being in the army is that you're given a weapon and you're being told that you could kill other human beings. Whether it's, for a defensive war, it was a good cause, at the end of the day, it somehow damages the personality and the morality of the person who's holding the weapon. It's a very sort of destructive for the mind to think that you could take the life of another human being, and many people are engaged in that would have to train themselves to think of the enemy not as a human being, but rather as a target or as a threat, or different ways to sort of rationalize or override that. The danger is that when you do that, you could lose respect for humanity in general. You lose that respect of Tzedem Elokim. When the Torah says that even in war, the respect for your body and the way you relieve yourself and the way you take care of yourself is of extreme importance, and if you don't do it correctly, God will abandon you. That is an element that added eventually to the education of people of how to treat each other. And I think I mentioned it before in a different class. Steven Pinker has this book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, where he speaks about the spread of violence in the world. And he shows through numbers that, surprisingly, even though we think that the world today is much more violent than it was in the past, it's actually the opposite. The violence is declining. I mean, we see, of course, huge numbers, but in proportion to the number of people in the world, it declines. And one of the turning points that he was able to identify is at the in medieval times in England, where all of a sudden new guidebooks were published on teaching people how to behave when they relieve themselves, when they eat, because people were barbarians. When you think of the nobility of Europe, in medieval times, they were not the nicest people. I think most of us probably would not survive a meal with them. We wouldn't be able to eat there. And he shows through literature how the attention to details of how you eat, how you take care of your body, actually changed the mentality of people towards torture and towards waging war, because those things are related to the idea of human dignity. And so the Torah has this built into the system. Unfortunately, this was misunderstood. Yes, you have a question there? No, we're good? Okay. So let's go back to the text. So this is what we have with the famous Vayama Hanecha Kadosh. It's a pasuk that was taken completely out of context. It has nothing to do with the way a woman dresses. Then we have another segment in Yeshayahu that is widely used, widely taken out of context, where the prophet lists all the items that women use to practice promiscuity. And it says here, this is Yeshayahu chapter 3, verses 16 to 24. יען כי גבהו בנות ציון, ותלכנה נטויות גרון ובסקירות עיניים, הלוך ותפוף תלכנה וברגליהן תעקסנה, וסיפח אדוני קודקוד בנות ציון, ואדוני פותהן יערה. Because because it says, because the daughters of Zion behave in a certain way, with their heads thrown back, roving eyes, mincing gait, making tingle with their feet, whatever that is, Hashem will punish them. So, no, but the interesting thing is when we speak about the punishment, the list of accessories and items used to cover oneself is so long that you say, it seems that the more you cover yourself, the more immodest you are. Because the prophet is talking to the immodest women, and he mentions in Hebrew, let's remember this, האחסים והשביסים והסהרונים, הנטיפות והשרות והרעלות, הפערים והצעדות והקישורים, בתי הנפש, הנחשים, טבעות, נזמי אף, מחלצות, מעטפות, מטפחות, חריטים, גאונים, סדינים, צניפות, רדיטים. It's about 20 items. So many of them are jewelry, אחסים, שביסים, but some of them are scarves. רעלות, this is the word ra'ul, is a veil, ra'ala, that covers the face at the end of verse 19. Also, in verse 22, המחלצות והמעטפות והמטפחות והחריטים, they are aprons, mantlets, cloaks, girdles, robes, and the thing that gives out what really this thing is all about. It's not about modesty or immodesty, and it goes back to the theme that if you look for the psukim that deal with it in Tanakh, you'll be surprised to see how prevalent it is. It's the Kadesh and Kadesha, the prostitution that was practiced in the temple, because in verse 23 it speaks about Gilyonim, Vasdinim, and the fine linen. The fine linen here refers to sheets, bed sheets. The word Sadin is actually not a Hebrew word; it's an Akkadian word, and it means the same thing. So we're not talking about a clothing item, it refers to beddings. So, and he speaks about Benot Zion. So those are the women who surround the temple and offer their services, and that is the concern of the prophet. Another verse from Yeshayahu. But so far, important is to see that we go through Tanakh, and we don't. I mean, definitely in Torah, we don't find any segment that says what to wear, what not to wear, except for one famous one: Lo yilbash gever simnat isha, v'lo yekli gever al isha. A man should not dress as a woman should not dress as a man. There are many interpretations to that, probably also related to the Kadesh and Kadisha story, but it doesn't say. We would have expected, if it's so important, to see a biblical text saying "Lo tilbash isha michnasayim," right? Something like that, or "V'chiseta et rosha tamid," or something like that. Nothing is mentioned. Yes, done. Yes, what you asked about whether a woman must braid her hair. Certain Orthodox circles, especially the Hasidim, held the rope from both sides, or the braid from both sides, and that is, they decided that ufara kohenet rosh haisha, going back to this verse, that it could be understood as both uncover and unbind. So therefore, it must be both covered and bound. Only that if she's married, she has to bind it and cover it, and better yet, shave it completely. And if she's not married, then braiding is enough. Yeah, but this is a complete distortion of the text. There's no support for that. But it's I mean, I blame the Hasidim, but Maimonides also took a little extreme.
So the yeshiva she went to in Israel wasn't Hasidic.
It doesn't matter. It's if they're in a certain area, they will say you have to braid it, or it has to be shoulder length. Long hair is not, like you said, not sneezdik. Yeah, but we'll get there. This is already 2,000 years down the line. We're trying to go first through the biblical sources. Well, yes, Alana.
This is medieval already, but
yeah.
What I was thinking of from the passage from Isaiah is actually sort of in cities when you had classes or guilds of prostitutes,
mm-hmm.
They had costumes that they had to wear,
mm-hmm.
Specifically,
right.
And they tended to be fancy, but fancy in a particular way,
right.
which marked them out. And that's actually, when you read the passage from Isaiah, that's sort of the first thing that comes to mind is like
right.
they have special garb that they wear.
Right. Yeah, that is true. That and we'll see that. That's important because as we progress with the text, we'll see that the central sugya in the Gemara, which is in Ketubot, that speaks about a woman who transgresses dat Yehudit. When you analyze the segments of this Mishnah carefully, you realize that it is probably this thing. It's probably all the things that the rabbi said, that if a woman does that, she's called overet al dat Yehudit. She's breaching Jewish practice. It means that she's dressing or behaving in a way that back at the day were the calling card of a woman of that profession. So we'll go back to the text. We'll have more. I think the Torah, just the Tanakh text, will take us more than one session. So let's see what else we could do with the Tanakh. We have this pasuk from Yeshayahu. This is Yeshayahu Mem Zayin, chapter Psukim Aleph Ad Gimel. It's a rebuke, or it's a prophecy of destruction towards the Babylonian. Redi u'shevi al afar bat Bavel, betulad bavel shevi la'aretz en kiseh bat kasdim, ki lo tosife yikru lach rakav ha'anuga. Come down and sit in the dust, O Virgin of Babylon. Sit on the crown without a throne, daughter of the Chaldeans, for you shall not anymore be called tender and delicate. Kehir Haim v'tahanikama, galit zamatech hespi shovel, gali shok ivri neharot. Tigal ervatech, gam terah hervatech, lakam ekach v'lo yafga adam. He says, take the millstone and grind meal, remove your veil. That is not, galit zamatech is reveal your braid. That should be the translation. Reveal your braid. Hispi shovel is
It's the modern Ben Tyre with the 4-inch Porcelino.
Yes.
So I'm a Ben Tyre.
Right. That's the problem.
The pasuk is saying, don't
do that.
Don't
right.
hang aside. I'm a holy man.
Right. Right. That's exactly that.
Scholar.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this has become also sort of the yardstick. Yeah. So for people who became Baal Tshuva, when they are being encouraged that to show that you're a true Baal Tshuva, that now you're, and we're talking about people who were religious to begin with, but they crossed over to do the Siyum Hashas and all that. Now when you don a hat and you have the head there, then you're fully religious. But Rabbi Yosef Mesas, when we get hopefully to his teshuvah, when he speaks about hair covering for women, he says En kan tzniut ela tzviut. It's like a word in Hebrew between modesty and hypocrisy. And why is that? Because it's easy to cover yourself up if you want to convey this is who I am, and that connects with the root of the word garment in Hebrew, which is beged, and it's the same root as treason. So the beged is means for a person to be a traitor, to
change.
to convey or to send a message that is not real. So we'll get to that. But what Micha is saying here is like Moshe said, is exact opposite. Is what Hashem wants from you is asod mishpat. Says it's all towards the other human being. Asod mishpat is with humanity, with society.
You don't show that, you know.
Yeah. Ahavat Hesed id with society. You do justice, meaning we try to get society up and running according to law, but within that we think about the poor and the needy and Asot Hesed. We don't want to crush them under the wheels of justice. We have to find a solution for them. We don't want Les Miserables or the third strike of California. We have to be careful with that. So you have to balance Mishpat v'Hesed. And to that, you add, when you come to your interaction with God, meaning don't wear your religion on your sleeve. Don't go around saying, look how religious I am, look how devout I am. That is between you and God. So very clearly, Micha says, and that is after he spoke about not bringing sacrifices. He says, Hashem does not want your sacrifices. Hashem does not want your firstborn. Forget about this. And actually, if you think of that, who was the one who offered his firstborn? Abraham. And Hashem and the Navi in the name of God says, I do not want that. I do not want the binding of Yitzhak. What I do want are the other elements of Abraham, Mishpat v'Hesed. That is what is needed. And keep modest with God. So far we've seen, we don't have any source that can offer us the meat and potatoes of tzniut in the Torah, and that the two verses, one in Torah, one in Nevi'im, that are used as the basis, the foundation for the arguments for tzniut, are not there. Now, this is not to say that one should not dress modestly, but that applies equally to men and women. I mean, as from the point of view of Torah, and that is not determined by the garment, but rather by one's personality. But we'll take a break here to drink coffee if you need, or whatever is needed, and we'll continue in a couple of minutes with the last source in Tanakh, or almost the last source in Tanakh. That of Tehillim, which is extremely important because it is mentioned in dozens of halachic rulings that limit women, and that is in Tehillim chapter 45. Kol kavuda bat melech pnima. So, before we end, let's see if anyone has any questions. So I just explained that again. Lastly, the word tzanua. Tzanua means to be, like I said, either reserved or quiet, not too vocal about what you do or your achievements. There are not too many words in Tanakh, if we go with the bioretical word, that are related to tzanua. We have one which is tzanif or tzenefa, tzadik nun pei, and that means to roll. So it's like, that plant, it's called in Hebrew altigabi, don't touch me. That
The mimosas.
the mimosa, right? It's in Hebrew it's called mimosa by shanit. It's like the shy mimosa that when you touch it rolls into itself. So that's tzanua. It rolls. You roll inside, but it's not about dressing in a certain way. It could relate on a tangent that someone who is maybe an introvert or very reserved does not want people to look at him, does not want to attract attention. But again, there's no clear indication in the pasuk that there is any commandment to dress in a certain way. Okay, so okay.